Okay. All right. So I hope you had an opportunity to work on problem 12.3b and hang out with your classmates, figure out maybe an informal group. If I don't hear from you again, like I said, by April 4th, I will assign you to a group and then you can pick a company. But meanwhile, problem 12.3b, Diamondback Welding Fabrication Corporation sells services pipe welding equipment. Following set accounts appear in its ledger. So you have some preferred 2% stock. So what does that mean, preferred 2% stock? That's preferred stock that has a promise of 2% dividends, 2% of the par values. In other words, in such a time that dividends are declared, so dividends have to be declared for them to be entitled to the dividend, preferred shares get 2% of $80, which would be $1.60 per share of that dividend. And they'll be paid before the common shareholders get their dividends. 100,000 shares authorized, 60,000 shares issued. Typically, dividends are only paid on issued shares. So only the 60,000 shares of the ones that are actually issued will get the dividends. Paid in capital in excess of par, preferred stock, 210,000. So this was some paid in capital from past stock sales. Common stock, $5 per par, 6 million shares authorized, 3.15 million shares issued. Paid in capital in excess of par, common stock, and retained earnings. All right, so and then we have a bunch of transactions which are asked to journalize. So first one, purchase 87,500 shares of Treasury Common at $8 per share. So 87.5 times 8 is 700,000. So they're going to debit for the transaction A. They're going to debit Treasury stock. You're going to debit 87.5 times 8, 700,000. And you're going to credit cash for that amount because you're buying those shares. All right, so that's part A. Part B, sold 55,000 shares of Treasury Common at 11 per share. So now you're getting cash. Now, how much cash are you getting? You're debiting cash 55,000 times 11. And then you need to credit Treasury shares, Treasury stock. Now remember, you have to credit it for the original par that you originally bought it here at $8 a share, right? So there's 55,000 shares that you're buying back out of those original 87,500 at 8. So I need to take 55,000 and times 8, and that's 440,000. Now, and of course, the difference goes to APIC Treasury stock. Will be a credit in the amount of 165,000. All right, C, issued 20,000 shares at preferred 2% at 84, right? So that's the 2% makes no difference for the perspective of issuance. So you debit cash in the amount of 20,000 times 84, and you credit preferred stock. Remember, you need to credit first the par value, and the par value of preferred stock, it tells us, is $80. You need to take 80 times 20,000, and the difference goes to APIC preferred stock. The difference. D part D. Issued 400,000 shares of common stock for cash, right? So again, this is easy, so you can debit cash of and you credit common stock for par value, the par value of common stock we know is from the top of the problem is $5. So you're going to take $5 times 400,000, and you credit APAC common stock for the difference. All right, and then part E. Any questions so far? Part E says sold 18,000 shares of Treasury common for $7.50 per share. Now that means they reissue. These are the remember we had first this was here 87,500 shares of common stock, Treasury stock. Then we sold 55,000 of them. So what they have left, there's still 32,500 still left in Treasury, and now we're selling another 18,000. All right, so we're going to get cash. We are selling them for 18,000 times 7.5. We're going to credit Treasury at the original price of it. The original price of the Treasury stock was 8, so we're selling 8 times 18,000. Now in this case, we actually, you see the credits exceed debits, but you know, as you probably suspected, you can also, the difference, there's no gains or losses, so you debit, in this case, you'll debit APAC Treasury stock for the difference. $10. All right. All right. So here, there were things will get a little bit more complicated. So how many shares? I need to know how many shares are in Treasury. And so I have this 32,500 minus I sold another 18,000. Okay, $14,500. That's still left in Treasury. Now, why is that important? Because we're going to be paying dividends. And I'm going to assume that if, you know, because Treasury shares are, you know, they're not with individual shareholders, they're in company treasury, they don't get the dividends. Kind of would we be, would company would, if you issued dividends on Treasury shares, you would not, you know, you would essentially be paying dividends to itself. Makes no sense. So this in Treasury, there's 14,500 shares. Now there's still what we need to know is we need to keep track because we're going to pay dividends, cash dividends, 160 on preferred stock and 03 on common stock. We need to know how many shares of outstanding are out there. So Treasury shares were all common. So we know that you know, common stock. We started with so we started with we started with 3.150. Sorry, 3.15. And we don't need a dollar sign here. That's how many shares it says there were in the beginning there. Then we issued additional 400,000 shares. And we have in Treasury 14,500. That's how many are sitting in the Treasury. Right, so in the end of the, you know, by the time we declare dividends, this is how many shares are outstanding that are common. did it just do? Outstanding common, right? 3,535,000 common shares, right? And then we have preferred stock.
Professor, just to clarify, you would remove the treasury common from the outstanding shares and keep them in a separate bucket?
Well, they're in treasury, so they don't get the dividend. You know, the dividend usually you pay to the outside shareholders, not to the company itself, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Even though some states you can actually, treasury shares can actually get dividends, but I'm assuming you can't. Because what kind of dividend is it? But anyway, but preferred shares, you had 60,000 originally. And then we had, we issued 55,000. No, we issued 20,000. And that's it. So there's just 80,000 shares of preferred. Right? The bottom line is, how much dividends do they get? Well, we know that common shares, they tell us, get 3 cents a share. So dividend per share will be 3 cents. And dividend per share per preferred will be 160, which is 2% of the $80 par. So $1.60 here. Right, so then total dividends will be, you know, this times 3.5355. I'm sorry, this times 80,000, 128. Right, so then total dividend will be just the sum of these two numbers, 234,65. So declaration of the, which is part F, of the dividend is you debit retained earnings for this amount. You created dividends payable this amount, right? And G, you just pay them, so you get dividends payable this amount. Created cash for this amount. Okay, so that's this problem. Okay? Any questions on this?